My name is Mackenzie Ellis. This is my presentation on the sensory and statistical evaluation of hard apple ciders. I'm a fruit and vegetable management major and am pursuing a minor in viticulture and enology, and I thought that choosing to test hard ciders would kind of fit in well with that. We chose hard apple ciders just because my group were all viticulture and enology interested. The hard cider market right now is just absolutely booming. Johnny Appleseed first planted apples for cider because it was safer to drink, and for a while cider kind of went out of popularity, but it's coming back, and people are growing apples specifically for cider again. So it's definitely a booming market and something that our group thought would be very interesting to test. So we chose four different hard ciders. We chose them at random at Dismore's actually. We didn't want to go in with kind of a set idea. We kind of wanted four different variations of each different cider. So we chose a Square Mile cider. It's a hopped hard cider, and it has an alcohol content of 6.7%. And it has an addition of Galaxy hops, which was added during cold conditioning, so it doesn't have any like the bitterness generally associated with hop additions. And the company said about the aroma qualities that it should have honeysuckle, melon, and peach from the hops, which is kind of interesting. We also chose the Smith & Forge hard apple cider. The cider has an alcohol content of 6% and was described by its producers as being a strong and robust semi-sweet cider. The Rambling Route cider of Yakima is listed at a 6.9% alcohol content and has a residual sugar of 2.6%. It's described as possessing aromas of pineapple and mineral qualities and flavor with a full-bodied finish. The fourth cider that we chose was an imported classic English hard cider that's made by Crispin out of Colfax, California. It's produced with the traditional English bittersweet cider apple varieties and has an alcohol content of 5.8%. So this is our lowest alcohol content. So our study used a panel of 20 people. 12 of them were men and 8 of them were women. The ages of our panels was 21 to 25, and like I was talking about earlier, the cider market's just kind of up and coming, so still kind of trying to get out there with the popularity. So our panel actually had a very low general consumption pattern. They actually stated that they usually drink beer and hard alcohol such as vodka and whiskey. College students, it's kind of expected to be that way. So, for our training to begin with, we asked our panelists if they had any ailments that would hinder their abilities to be a part of this panel. And we asked them not to smoke or drink for 24 hours before the training, just to not hinder their palate at all, or just to make sure that they are a willing and able participant in this study. The attributes that we tested were sweetness, dryness, effervescence, and relative apple flavor. The controls used were apple juice for sweetness, Chateau Ste. Michelle dry Riesling for dryness, a generic lemon lime soda for effervescence, and Angry Orchard crisp apple cider for relative apple flavor. We kind of wanted to do apple flavored things as to not confuse the testers. We wanted to give them, for example, sweetness and give them apple juice to give so this is an apple flavor and this is sweet with apple, since they were testing hard ciders. For the training session, each control was poured into small white plastic cups, about 2-ounce shot glasses. Each of them had a number designation on the side, and they were presented in a random order. We just told them which one they would be testing for with each number. The panelists were asked to rate the intensities on a 15-centimeter line scale and ranked from low to high. So if they were sampling something that they believed had high sweetness, they would rate it as a high. Water was provided between each sample, and so participants could rinse their mouths and clear the previous flavor as to give a better test. We chose to do our testing the next day so the panelists were not fatigued by so many samples. But we also chose to do it soon enough that they hadn't forgotten their standards and didn't have to wait to smoke or drink for that much longer. As college students, this is an issue sometimes. During our panel, each panelist was given each of the 4 different ciders in a random order with a 3-digit code on the side of each cup. They tested, this time they were asked to test each cider for all 4 attributes, sweetness, dryness, effervescence, and apple flavor, and then rank each attribute on the 15 centimeter line scale, just as they had done with the controls. The only difference was each cider had to be tested for the 4 different attributes. So here are some of our results, the results for our controls. The intensity ratios on the y-axis was determined by measuring in centimeters where each panelist marked the intensity of each attribute, divided by the total length of the line scales. So we got a decimal which represented each evaluation on a scale from 0 to 1. All the data is extremely sporadic, and there isn't much of a correlation between anything that the panelists found in each attribute. As you can see, I mean, for example, our line for sweetness here is just all over the place. It's very interesting. Because the panelists were trained a minimal amount, the study proves that a trained panel is necessary to evaluate such complex samples. The panelists varied in their reported intensities of controls and from sample to sample. There was confusion over how to use the scales and how to compare the controls that were used in the training session as correlation to the tested samples the next day. So again, for sweetness, they didn't realize that here's apple juice, it's sweet. Now find your control of this is what sweet tastes like, and how does this cider that you have in front of you compare to that. There were people that tried to rate all 5 attributes for the very first control, and we found that this may have been some error on our part. We might not have given enough instruction. It was just our very first time and very confusing for some people. For example, honestly, it was kind of frustrating watching college students not understand if they perceived a lot of an attribute to rank it high, and if they perceived a low amount to give it a smaller ranking. So I think that just further testing on our part and further training on the panelist part would have helped that a lot. So in order to make this test more successful, a larger panel should have been used. We found that we kind of thought that if we were testing hard ciders, we wouldn't have a problem at all finding people to try them for us, and we actually found it kind of difficult. It was just kind of poor timing in the year. Everybody's very busy with school and whatnot. So without compensation or without larger facilities, having a larger panel is kind of difficult. We would like to have more control over our panelists. We were in a large room at one of the fraternities on campus that one of our members of our group, he's a part of. And so we didn't have a way to block panelists from each other, and so there was some talking which we attempted to mediate, but there's just nothing you can do about them looking at each other's samples unless we were to do much smaller groups, and people just didn't have time to wait for us to do groups of 4 and spread them out throughout the room and that sort of thing. We wish that we would have given our panels more training. It takes time and energy, and we wish we would have had a larger group of people as well, so we could cut people out that weren't as good at it. So like you saw in the data for the controls, if we found that they were very sporadic in what they were finding compared to other people's data, then we could choose somebody else to take their place, and we didn't have that time or that capacity. We also may have had to pay people other than just in free hard cider in order to do more training. We also probably should have included people who have experience with hard cider, who actually like it and come in with some sort of knowledge in the background of hard cider. They would have been able to perceive different flavors, I believe, throughout the cider. Might have made it a little bit simpler for them. For the field of hard cider, we contributed that people in our age group of 21 to 25 may not normally consume hard cider, and this could be a demographic that they should look into more thoroughly to extend their market. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me.